So based on this data, the CMHC predicts that Canadian home prices will hit record values once again in 2026. Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Griffin here. And if I told you that Canadian home prices actually had room for upside growth over the next couple of years, you'd probably roll your eyes and think that I'm delusional. But here's the thing, although Canadians are feeling the effects of the higher cost of living and the gap between property prices and disposable income have grown to completely unrealistic levels over the past decade, well, according to the CMHC, the Canadian housing market is poised to witness a historic surge in home prices by 2026, fueled by relentless demand stemming from a burgeoning population, as indicated by a recent forecast, where despite a notable slowdown over the past few years, characterized by a 1/3 decrease in sales and a 15% dip in prices across the country, some predict that this period of lull has now laid the groundwork for yet another liftoff in home prices, even though it may be hard to believe. Now, here's the thing, during the downturn that's been experienced over the past couple of years, the pool of potential home buyers has of course expanded significantly during this time, stemmed mainly by that robust population growth, right? We saw not too long ago that Canada has added an extra 1 million residents over the past 9 months alone, bringing the population now to over 41 million in Canada, but we simply cannot keep up with demand in regards to housing supply. And that's mainly for rental units, mind you, let alone actual houses and condos for people to purchase and live in long term. Now, of course, factors contributing to housing price shifts are generally more intricate and involved than, simply looking at supply and demand. But in the case of Canada specifically, right now, this is by far the main contributing factor contributing to home prices remaining high, as people still need places to put down roots and live, but new supply for single family homes, semis, and townhomes simply is not able to keep up with what's needed to create any form of affordability like we've seen in the past in Canada. That being said, it does need to be mentioned that although we do, often group Canada as a whole together when speaking about the housing market, well, this couldn't be further from reality when analyzing individual markets. So that's why I generally recommend only focusing on the micro scale for your region rather than Canada as a whole, as is often portrayed in the media, but doesn't actually serve a huge purpose if you're a buyer in a given, pocket of the country. But consider this, with mortgage rates poised to decrease probably sometime over the next 9 to 12 months. And yes, everything does point to this unfolding, even though the Bank of Canada has once again maintained interest rates at 5% this past week or so, and also combined with economic uncertainty somewhat fizzling off in the later half of 2024 as the markets gain more confidence. Well, it's for these reasons that the CMHC anticipates a gradual return of buyers to the housing market, which would kickstart, of course, a new era of growth in the Canadian housing market. So essentially, this would be achieved through the convergence of lower interest rates, a more robust economy, and the record population growth observed in 2023 and still happening to this day, all of which is expected to translate into increased sales volume, according to the CMHC once again, with a discernible shift towards more affordable housing options across various markets nationwide. But honestly, we'll see how that one actually plays out. Overall though, here's what the CMHC's projected housing forecast looks like through to 2026, with sizable increases in all three scenarios, which is something that I have spoken about many times on the channel over the past 6 months, where I've been of the mindset that as soon as the general market sentiment shifts to higher levels of confidence, which it has already somewhat started to, and is in correlation with interest rates dropping, well, that pent-up and increased demand will push house prices up further once more. There's really just no other scenario that could happen considering the amount of supply that is just dwindling here in Canada. And that's not to say that we'll see anything like during the pandemic though, but even the middle of the road growth figures projected by the CMHC still provides increases of 15%, which is very significant over the next 2 years alone, and honestly more than I would have even anticipated myself. But yeah, I'm definitely seeing it in the market also, with friends of mine who are realtors telling me that, the demand has absolutely increased and buyers are seemingly eager to jump back in with anticipated interest rate cuts over the next year. In fact, as we had looked over a couple of months back, data from Royal LePage's recent survey indicated that 56% of Canada's adult population says that they have postponed their property search because of higher interest rates, which does make sense because with higher interest rates, well, it's of course harder to qualify for homes that honestly haven't come off of their peak price that much, even though they have somewhat in certain markets. Other markets are still pretty much just as high as they were during the height of housing prices a year or so ago. Having said that, among these 56% of adult Canadians, apparently 51% say that they will be jumping back into the market if interest rates start to decline, where for 10%, all it would take is a 25 basis point cut. And this, in my opinion, is probably in light of thinking that this first cut would then be indicative of continued rate decreases. So taking out a variable mortgage could be somewhat beneficial under that light. 18% say that they'd be waiting for a rate cut between 50 to 100 basis points, so between 0.5% and 1%, and then 23% want to see a reduction of more than 100 basis points, 1%, before they would return to the market. And very interestingly, from this data, only 20% said that they are no longer planning to buy a home. So what this data is essentially telling me, at least, is that it confirms my assumptions that we're seeing the market having bottomed out, and once rates do start to decrease, buyers will be jumping back in, forcing property prices back up in most markets because there just simply isn't much more supply than there's been over the past couple of years. And for the record, most of all of the housing supply that is being created here in Canada, in most markets, specifically here in the Ottawa-Gatineau capital region of Canada, it is all these 18 unit buildings roughly that are just basically apartment buildings. It's certainly not single family homes, semi-detached, and even townhomes. Honestly, the money is just not there for developers relative to the profit that they can make creating these rental units, renting them out to immigrants. That's pretty much what's happening. And then fully maximizing the lot cost relative to its size, basically. But yeah, so let me know down in the comments if you're a new buyer looking to enter the market, what your strategy is regarding timelines and interest rates. I would love to know. All right, now what about interest rates though, right? As this is going to be one of the main initiating factors leading to a major uprise in demand once more as buyers gain purchasing power. Well, for one thing, the most recent meeting from the Bank of Canada kept rates stable once again, stating that things are moving in the right direction, which isn't overly surprising right now. But the strategy that the Bank of Canada will have to consider moving forward, at least in my opinion, will need to balance inflation control, sure, but also stimulate the economy that has seen signs of distress and that isn't performing nearly as well as even down in the United States. So overall though, it's important to consider population growth in this macro overview of what's going on in Canada, as the rapid population expansion has allowed for somewhat modest aggregate growth figures in terms of total GDP from the country because, well, of course, there's more people, but this actually does mask, though, the underlying weakness that's evident in per capita growth rates, which is something that we've covered amply in my recent video about why Canada is becoming poor as a nation on a per capita basis. So in essence, predicting the future of Canada's housing market, of course, proves to be a difficult task, and while underlying factors suggest a trajectory trajectory towards higher price points, well, the crucial question still remains. Can ordinary Canadians manage these hefty mortgages with wages that lag far behind? And while Canada's housing market continues to rank among the most expensive compared to resident income levels. But hey, what are your thoughts on this matter? Once again, make sure to let me know down in the comments if you think the CMHC's predictions are completely outlandish or if this makes sense considering the impacting variables. And with that said, make sure to check out the resources down below in this video's description to links to claim some free money when opening a new brokerage account or opening up a high interest savings account. With the little money that most Canadians are able to save, every bit counts. So why not get some free money? Additionally, if you want to learn more about why Canada is becoming poorer, make sure to check out this video right here. So thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.